Today is Victory in Europe Day.
Just as I have a dream.
A salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela.
And Mrs. Thatcher.
So, hello, welcome to Systems Reimagined, episode 11. Today, I'm joined by Samuel and Rachel to discuss some of the latest news and things like that. So, we're going to start off with the probably one of the biggest stories of the week, the Sarah Everard story, obviously tragedy. Then we're going to move on to some Meghan and Harry, drama with the royals, etc. Then go on to some COVID updates, and then move on to South America to discuss Lula. We have some news surrounding that. So I don't know who wants to start us off with the Sarah's case and things like that. Any takers? Okay, Rachel, go for it.
So for anyone that kind of maybe has heard of what's going on but doesn't necessarily know how or where it originated from, it's the case of a young woman walking home in her local neighbourhood in Clapham in London this past week. And she was abducted, and since then it's been confirmed that she was killed by the man that abducted her, who is a practicing police officer. He was in the Royal Guard, and this incident in and of itself is sadly not that rare, but it really seems to have kind of awoken a consciousness in a lot of people. And this past week, it's kind of led to a really national movement now, people sharing a lot of resources online and people just kind of speaking up about their own stories of sexual abuse and sexual harassment and how rife it is in society. It also coincided with The Guardian publishing a statistic, which I'm sure people again will have seen going around online this week, that 97% of 18 to 24-year-old women have been sexually harassed. And so the two, I think, in unison have just really snowballed this movement. And from there, we've seen a lot of protests. We've seen a Reclaim the Night protests in London and in a lot of other cities, with vigils being held for Sarah, but also just for survivors of domestic abuse, for sexual harassment and things. I'll just speak really briefly. Warwick University, where Benji and I are studying, Shame on You Warwick, which is an organisation that was kind of created in the wake of another sexual harassment group chat scandal a couple of years ago, are very active in campaigning for this, and they held a vigil on campus last night for people to come and speak about their own experiences and just kind of have it as a safe place, because there is this curfew of women not being able to leave the house after it gets dark, or not without a male companion, or not without wearing like really bright clothes. So that was very, very emotional, but it was very empowering. It didn't last very long because there was some like police presence, as we've seen in Clapham, and I'm sure we'll kind of speak about more, with kind of those scenes there turning more violent last night. But yeah, that's kind of a rough overview of, as Benji said, what is just an absolutely shocking situation.
Yeah, I was speaking to you about it, Rachel, earlier on today, and it's just crazy. It's when we went from International Women's Day, celebrating, women, and, that was great. And then from there, we went to the 97% statistic coming out, and then this whole shamble, and also the Meghan stuff, Meghan and Harry stuff when it comes to the treatment of her in the media, etc., which was kind of exemplified with the Oprah interview. But yeah, it just hasn't it just hasn't been a great couple of days for women worldwide. And it's I was also speaking to you about this earlier, about like how I see this almost as a BLM type moment for the feminist movement, where we had to have something so bad as what happened to Sarah kind of occur in order for people to get the consciousness surrounding the issues and to take an interest in women's rights in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think I was going to say it's a shame that
we have to wait for such a serious, like, crazy moment happen to, you know, to get some attention and get people gathering and to question, sexism in a broader sense, because, as the statistic that you said, the 97%, I think it doesn't really come as a surprise because, we all know women who, every single woman we know, like they've had a story, whether it be, for more serious cases to more less serious, which is still pretty serious, like catcalling. Like we've all known women who've experienced this, and it really shouldn't come as a surprise. So yeah, I just think it's a horrible situation, and also yeah, my regards to the family and everyone surrounding her for this horrible event. But yeah, I think it's a tricky one, because I think we are slowly moving the narrative. And it says like, for the longest time, which everyone has pointed out, it's always the onus has always been on the woman, to you have to go take steps to avoid this situation happening to you. But I think finally we are, moving beyond that and pointing the responsibility at rightfully the men involved in the situation because we're the ones with the attitude, and we're the ones who like, start create the situation, that women find themselves in. So obviously we should be the ones being blamed. But alongside that, I think we also have to move away from just looking past individual actions and try like look systematically why this occurs, why we have this attitude and violence towards women. And I think that's definitely something to tackle, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I obviously don't have all the answers because, I think throughout history, there has been sexism and gender-based violence. I don't think we can deny that. But, I think, looking at our current problems, I think a lot of them do come, as a result of, the patriarchal structure that we have in our society, whether it be in the workplace, when it comes to pay, job roles, but also even in like the family structure, which has ultimately put women, at the bottom of the family structure. I mean, obviously there's cases that it's not always like this, but there's like being at the bottom, like being financially dependent on the man and being just relegated to working in the house and taking care of children for the longest of times, and I think, this like this stand like this giving women this like place in society is obviously, I think, really led to, to this aggression and this attitude towards women, this violent attitude towards women. And I do think we have to look at how, how this structure came to be. And yeah, I think.
And educate people on it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of work, especially from like on the left wing. I mean, they talk about how, especially the family structure, how like this change, to a more nuclear and hierarchical family structure, like was really sharpened from the transition from feudalism to capitalism, and how how those two systems correlate. So I do think, I mean, obviously we didn't know the full answers, but I think it's time to start looking at this more systematically, how this came to be, and yeah, sorry for the rant, but I just think, yeah, it's time to like, we can talk about how all we want about individual actions, like taking the right steps. We have to actually look and diagnose the problem in a more serious way so that we can start, re-educating ourselves, especially men, on how to treat, the issue of sexism and our violent attitudes towards women. So yeah, it something has to be looked into, and we have to do more research and scientific analysis on this issue,
Yeah, for sure. I would agree so much that like individual actions are brilliant, and not for a second am I kind of saying that men shouldn't go away, and if like one of their friends makes a questionable remark, or they see like in a club just kind of like unnecessarily like even just touching women to get by, these small microaggressions ultimately do build up. And as much as it's important that we're calling our friends out, I think, as you say, Samuel, it needs to be more kind of like systematic, and it needs to come from education. Like girls are kind of taught one thing at school and boys completely different thing. The whole narrative around like how girls are treated is so kind of toxic. Even just, you know, kind of like when you're in the playground when you're little, and it's like comments like, oh, if he pulls your hair, he likes you. Just so many kind of really, really questionable things like this are just so ingrained. And I think, as you say, it needs to be like a really big societal shift to kind of start combating that, rather than just relying on individuals to do the work. I think also it's worth mentioning, like, it's a bit of an uncomfortable topic, and I think that's often why parliamentarians avoid it. But things like the porn industry are so toxic for how a lot of young men and boys kind of view women, and view like how their kind of role is, and this kind of power balance, or power imbalance, I should say, and kind of role of subservience and things, when boys are at such a young age. And again, that comes back down to education. If we're having more extensive kind of proper like sex education programs, and speaking to people about consent and what that means from a young age, that can only be a positive. But until we kind of like get past this like British stiff upper lip kind of conversation where we don't want to talk about things like that, we're never going to combat this issue. You know, it's not coincidental that we have one of the highest teenage pregnancy rates in all of Western Europe. You know, it's because we refuse to have these conversations. And so I think, as you say, we just need a far more extensive and wide-ranging kind of like education to change before we can change things like this. You know, conversations around the police and kind of structure and their funding programs and things like that, because I think it was quite insensitive that we saw in the House of Commons after this disappearance was first reported, you know, Conservative MPs saying we need more police on the streets. Women will feel safer if there's more policing. Like, no one feels more comforted than seeing like a local bobby out doing the rounds. Well, in this case, clearly there are more comforting things than extra police, because it was a police officer that was responsible. So I think we need kind of community action, and, as I say, just wider and more extensive education programs before we can start to make positive changes.
Yeah, I agree.
Benjay, could I quickly piggyback on the point thing? Because funnily enough, I was actually talking about this issue with my mom, awkwardly enough, but yesterday. And it's like, no doubt, I do think that, you know, the porn industry has, you know, definitely warped the idea of, you know, relations between a man and a woman, and ideas of consent. But and obviously I think that needs to be addressed. But we also have to acknowledge that, you know, these things have been as prevalent before without the porn, you know. So a lot. I think it's just as I said, sharpens the.
It's like an aggravating factor.
Aggravating factor. That's a good word. Yeah. We also have to look at, you know, why, you know, because it's really grown the industry as a whole. So we have to look at why, the causes of that as well, you know, because obviously, you know, it does address like as humans, you know, when it comes to sex, you know, it's a natural thing. You desire, you know, those types of relations. But also another reason why, like, you know, so many people, like, for example, when OnlyFans, like, I heard so many stories of like why, like, some women who do it just to pay off certain bills, you know, that they like debt that they have, you know. So we also have to, like, a lot of these things are tied to economics things as well, you know, like just out of desperation to provide for themselves, you know. And also goes back to, like, you know, the woman's place in society, in the workplace, and family also, like, which forces them to do these roles that they might not want to do, you know. Even like the ideas of like prostitution, like, you know, some people are there. I mean, obviously there's like, I mean, if you're acting in porn and like you want to do that, all power to you, you know. I'm not doing anything against you, but there is a case where there are, you know, people do it out of desperation to provide and make money for themselves. Also, so that also needs to be looked at.
Just adding on to that, I believe I did see this, that when coinciding with the increase in university tuition, you saw an increase in student sex work as well, I believe. I want to say quickly go back generally to the framing surrounding this whole, especially the online activism. Like, I saw a lot of the these posts going around saying, oh, you know, she did all the right things. She wore like running shoes. She was speaking to her partner, et cetera, and like listed out all the precautions that women take, you know, in order to be safe when they come home late at night and things like that. But what made me a bit annoyed about that was, like, I just find that framing of like the idea that we have to have that conversation, that women have to do certain things to literally be safe is just mind numbing, you know, like literally just humans trying to get home safely. And, you know, that's it. Like, you know, it shouldn't be such a gendered issue just to literally have, you know, be able to walk home and things like that, you know? And yeah, so I hated that framing of it. And I just feel like this is an opportunity to like shift, just similar to how like Black Lives Matter, we were able to shift the conversation a lot more to the left with regards to like, questioning police funding, etc., and questioning certain attitudes towards race. This is a similar thing where we can shift the goalpost and of how we perceive sexism and how we aim to tackle it, you know? And yeah, obviously it's shameful it had to come in this way, but it is a good time to capitalize on this to really try change public mood and things like that.
And yeah, I think you have to also follow, like, you know, as it was International Women's Day a few days ago, you know, we have to follow that tradition of and the roots of that celebration, you know. And it's also like the founders of the International Women's Day, you know, they very much, you know, viewed sex and gender based issues, you know, in the wider context of economics and how these tie into certain structures of, you know, gender-based violence, gender employment, and, you know, and all these different aspects. So we really need to have like, you know, more like a holistic view. And yeah, I mean, obviously in the meantime, it doesn't harm to individually correct our actions and try, you know, damage control. But you're never going to solve systematic issues one individual action at a time. It's not going to happen, you know. So we have to, everything's interconnected, I think, and, you know, we have to start adjusting it accordingly, you know, and start a re-education process, you know, to address these issues and change attitudes.
I will also say, like, even right now we're seeing it with COVID. I believe I saw this thing on The Economist. I believe it was The Economist, and it showed that working mothers were the ones who are most impacted, like negatively, of course, by coronavirus. You know, so it's not like this is it's like there's like these surface level you know, issues with like societal issues, but these run much deeper than just, it's like a lot of economic injustice, and also, you know, just some of the smaller things, like the idea of having, obviously I'm not saying they're small and like they're a big deal and we have to solve them, but, you know, the idea of like walking home alone at night, for example, or like yeah, I mean, the whole idea that you need to have like a male companion with you to walk at home like alone, I mean, walk at home at night is just so like just stupid, you know. And like I just wish we didn't live in a world which that was even a conversation on the table.
Exactly. I think just in the whole conversation, it's never like the onus is always put on women. So I think it's so interesting, kind of what Samuel was saying. Like it's not a woman's issue. We're not asking for this. Like at the end of the day, the buck kind of does stop with men and like calling out this questionable behavior and just kind of like checking yourself. But I think also just kind of when like these statistics are reported, like, oh, 1 in 20 women will probably get raped in their lifetime, it's always like something that is done to the woman. It's not 1 in 20 men is a rapist. Like, you know, it's the same thing. Like 97% of women suffer from sexual harassment, rather than like 97% of men either are themselves or know of sexual harassers. Like the onus is always put onto women. And I think it's so damaging. But yeah, certainly the conversation does need to change. I think it was ironic to see lovely on Monday, loads of kind of men putting pictures with their mum and sisters and like saying Happy International Women's Day, and then like a radio silence. Like I get there's a whole other debate around kind of performance activism and things, but you know, it's like the bare minimum if people take that route to kind of share informational resources, or like on their own accord, not kind of publicizing it on social media, to help sign some of these petitions, to donate some money if they're in a position where they can, to domestic abuse charities, you know, things that we've seen only kind of accentuated by the pandemic. And I think just finally as well, in terms of International Women's Day and the founders very mindful of kind of the impacts of capitalism on gender and sexism. there was also kind of a lot of talk around how COVID not only has kind of like heightened the domestic burden of women in the home and childcare responsibilities, but also women are more likely now to be on furlough, more likely to lose their job, and they will find it harder then to seek employment, whether that's just kind of like because of internal biases and things like that, or because of childcare responsibilities that we've kind of spoken about. You know, that gender pay gap is prevalent, and again that just kind of snowballs, and it all has a like butterfly effect on kind of then women being forced into these other industries, you know, like sex work and things that we've spoken about. So I think, yeah, kind of you've hit the nail on the head with it is just a far wider societal issue that needs to be addressed. And it's not just kind of like a week-long thing and people are going to protest and then they're going to go home. You know, it has to just change the conversation. I mean, I say this like I don't know how much it will, but
let's hope at least. And you just have to keep the conversation going, you know, with all these issues. And especially this one as heightened. I do quickly, before I go to you, Samuel, want to just mention something that I was at this I was watching this politics panel basically hosted by a War Politics Society, and it was to do with women's education, but just more generally like the life of like women abroad in, you know, less developed countries and also in the UK. And I believe it was like this lady was speaking about how over a whole like a lifetime of a man, you make around like 1.1 like million pounds total or something like that. And then as a woman, it's reduced to like 800,000 or something total. And then and they were looking at, you know, where's the big point where you fall, like where the earnings really start to separate. And they found like, obviously there is a baseline gender pay gap issue, but where earnings really start to fall is as soon as the woman has a child. And that is a big issue, which we have to, you know, work out, because just because a woman should not be penalized for having a child. You know, that's not something which should be done in society. And in terms of earnings, that is what we're really seeing. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that to the whole economic injustice.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I mean, we should move on soon to like maybe like the protests and stuff like that. But it is interesting. Like I was listening to this lady called Kristen Godsey, and she's involved in like Eastern European studies, and she was looking at like women and their like quality of life you know, in the Eastern Bloc, so under, you know, state socialism. And it was interesting, like how she reported that how, like, you know, I mean, despite all its flaws, which were a lot of them, you know, they did achieve a lot of, you know, women overall had, you know, they reported better quality of life, you know, better like relations with men, like more autonomy, because, you know, ultimately they had more financial independence in those systems, you know. And for example, the maternity leave there was much higher, so you could go there and it wouldn't cost your job, for example. So I mean, as you said, like these, I mean, there are certain economic issues like, you know, maternity leave and with things around unemployment that do, you know, ultimately affect a woman's quality of life. So yeah, that was also just an anecdote that I found pretty interesting.
Also, in some, like in the Soviet bloc, they had really good childcare, I believe, or it was something along those lines. Like I remember reading that.
I know Eastern Bloc is definitely.
Good childcare as well.
I mean, despite
there is a lot of flaws.
Despite everything, but that was still like an issue that, you know, even compared to like their Western counterparts, they're pretty ahead of their time in that sense, you know. And they were actually one of the Soviets were one of the first to make International Women's Day a thing, you know. So they were like the first country to adopt that. So I mean, it is worth considering, you know, but yeah. Anyway, should we move on to the protests?
Yeah. Well, I mean, who wants to take that?
What else is it? I mean, just a quick anecdote. I mean, I think the optics of, you know, because just to give a breakdown, there was a vigil in Clapham. Clapham Commons about you know, about the death and mourning the death, and it basically met with harsh repression from the police. And I would just think like the optics of that is so bad, because first of all,
so bad.
This is just like a mourning of a death of a woman who, you know, was brutally killed and abused. done by a policeman, and now the policemen are coming to violently repress women and everyone, just mourning the loss of this woman. And it's just like, what were they thinking? Like, and first of all, like, and also like I was doing some background research, like the organizers of this event were very careful about how they planned it. They encouraged everyone to wear masks, keep their distance. They took a lot of precautionary steps, but they were still met with such violence, and I just think it's pretty shocking. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think like you can't escape the irony there, that they're kind of protesting around men and not being able to be out at night, and the fact that this woman was killed by a police officer. I just think, I understand that like Cressida Dick, the kind of chief of the Met, has come out today and said that she won't resign, and that it was a very hostile crowd and it was difficult to manage. And yes, there were maybe one or two people there to kind of cause trouble, but I think realistically it was a peaceful protest. It was a very emotional one, and I think people need an outlet for this, and need to kind of show that, like, the sad truth is a lot of those women were only there because there was a crowd. They wouldn't have gone alone. I've seen so many reports of kind of like friends and just women in the media like saying they haven't left their house since this has happened, or certainly not when it's kind of been dark. So I think it's, yeah, as you say, the optics of this situation really aren't favorable there. Yeah, I think there just needs to kind of be a lot of caution around people's right to protest in this situation. And as you say, it's not like they weren't wearing masks. We've seen a lot of like anti-COVID demonstrations and stuff like that, with little like uproar. Everyone was wearing a mask. There was social distancing where this could happen. So yeah, I think there just needs to be a lot of caution around kind of supporting this movement rather than bludgeoning it, because it won't work.
Yeah, you literally said the point I was going to make. Like, we've had a lot of unmasked protests.
Yeah.
We met with way less violence than we saw, last night, I think it was. So yeah, just horrendous. And actually, yeah, as you said, I don't really understand what the Metropolitan Police are doing. Like, so, like, I don't know. It's very frustrating. And I'm not even like a woman, so I can only imagine what it would actually be like.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's funny how, like the two protests that get attention is Black Lives Matter and this visual, like, after all like these stupid protests about anti-COVID protests and, having these conspiracy theorists like making speeches and stuff, like you have the fact that we're focusing on these ones and we crack it, and they're the most heavily cracked down on. It's just shocking. And I think there's like a history of policemen, like crushing like these popular movements, historically. So it's not anything new, I think, from the police, but I think more people realizing this and how, how they oftentimes function, in these instances.
Also, it shows where like media biases lie in terms of how these things are reported. Yeah, that's a big one I've been thinking about recently. It's just like, I don't know, like media shapes so much perception, I feel like, in our society. And so if you get lots of media outlets being like, trying to shut down like the idea surrounding these movements, then it's inevitable that it will, eventually.
Manufacturing consent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that provides a really interesting segue there, in that all of the headlines today have been Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge, attending not a planned vigil, but going this morning to Clapham Common and paying her respects. And the palace said that this is something that she wanted to do in a private capacity, because she remembers before she was married to the Duke of Cambridge, not feeling safe in London, kind of walking home on an evening. And not to be too cynical, but you can say that it was a private visit. She wasn't wearing a mask. And there were press there. And I think that leads very nicely into how the media have been like splashing this picture of her all over the headlines this morning. You know, like Kate's vigil, a moment of private kind of like consideration. She was there. It wasn't a showy gesture. You know, she stands shoulder to shoulder with like the women of Britain, basically, is what the Daily Mail have been putting forward this morning. And I think if that was Meghan, the kind of differences, I know we've gone over them, but just the way that both women were spoken about in such different capacities in the tabloids, and in the press, and I guess just wider kind of then going on to what's been a very damaging week for the palace after that kind of bombshell Oprah interview at the beginning of the week.
Yeah, I mean, if Megan went and like there was headlines about it, it would probably be, bitching about how she didn't have a mask or something. That would be it.
Like making this kind of like innocent girl, like making the movement about her, like putting the emphasis
being too political, or
Yeah, exactly.
It is so scum. Like if you, I don't know if people have watched the whole interview, but I haven't even watched the whole interview myself. But I've seen sections of it, and I believe there is one section where they go over the different headlines and like compare and contrast how Meghan's been treated, in the media, and it's just horrendous. My favorite one that I saw was the avocados one, where they said, was it that what was it that I forgot?
It was something like how to cure your morning sickness. Kate's favorite is avocado.
Yeah.
And then when it was Meghan, it was like the kind of like environmental impacts of shipping this and how toxic and damaging this is.
Exactly. And it's like, I think it was also about like how she's fueling the avocado gang war in to be fair, like
crazy.
To be fair, like the media is correct in saying that there is like a gang war over like avocados in certain areas. But like, homie, I'm telling you, Meghan's not going to be getting her avocados from some random place in like South America. She's getting some hella organic avocados, and like it won't be involved in that, like fair trade.
Yeah, I mean, that's not her fault. I mean,
exactly,
that's capitalism. I mean, it's just such double standards, and I think with the interview, like, it's just like, I mean, I don't understand how anyone's surprised by a lot of the claims she makes. We've seen, I mean, we know, of, the reputation the Crown has of being very controlling and very hostile to people that they don't particularly fit in with their particular mold of royals, because the royals is very, it's based on like the bloodline, and if you're part of that bloodline, you're going to be the head of the country, like. It's based on, just like this. So I don't get why people would be surprised about, about their treatment towards her, or like the claims of race with the baby. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's like this the royals are so notoriously, known for like, being very traditional, it's very like, incestual basically, and they've had on an individual basis. How many stories? Like, I don't know what king it was, but who was the one that he left the crown to be with his wife? I forgot his name, but he was associated with like the Nazis, for example.
Was it George? Sorry, I don't know.
No,
I don't know, but
it was the Queen's uncle, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was associated with the Nazis, for example. I just look at like the institution's history, like of like, of looting Africa, and the rest of their colonies to build their wealth. It's like, are you really surprised that like there's so much stories like this, and what we've seen with Diana, like she, like, just because she was a bit different, how she got treated, so yeah, I'm not surprised at all by the claims. I mean, yeah, and just like and just like the backlash to this, like, it hasn't been that critical. I mean, like, especially like someone like Piers Morgan, for example, like he just claimed like Meghan was lying, like with nothing to back up his evidence. He just said, "Oh, she's lying." Like,
but he's so spiteful to her. Like, it's unreal.
I think there's personal things there.
Yeah, exactly. But like, generally, I think with the crown, I'm not surprised at all they asked about the race of the baby, not the race of the baby, like how dark skinned the baby would be. It just doesn't surprise me. The whole idea of the crown is like you need to fit in, as you said, into that certain type of mold, and that comes like with personality traits as well as your physical appearance. I feel like
And your social standing.
social status. I mean, there's everything to do. Like it's all optics for the crown. And then I would also say like, yeah, it generally doesn't really like none of this stuff. I mean, also the mental health things that came up that Megan spoke about how she didn't want to. There's times where she woke up and didn't really want to be there anymore and things like that. And if it wasn't for Harry, then maybe she would have, potentially taken her own life. Something like that doesn't surprise me. Like we saw with even Diana, how she was struggling with her mental health loads with her treatment in the royal family. So that again should also not be surprising. And I don't think I have anything else to add apart from those things. But
yeah.
And the Piers Morgan thing I do find also quite comedic. The idea that he stormed off when he has also made a brand of trying to take down snowflake lefties, and then he was the biggest. Also, I mean, just we can generalize that to anyone who's on like a talk show who walks off midway because they're not too happy about the host's opinions or the facts presented to them. Like, I mean, come on, you're on this show, right, to speak about your opinions and debate them. You're not here to be like, oh no, I can't handle it, then walk off. Like, so, that basically, I just find it ironic with him because of his, like the way he brands himself essentially.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's like been quite vocal, hasn't he, in coming out and saying that it's not the last we've heard of him. There's kind of talk about him joining LBC and other different organizations. I think that he's kind of a broadcaster's dream in terms of like what he's done for the ratings at ITV is incredible. Like morally speaking, very, very dubious. Yeah. But I guess as an editor, that's a good thing.
I think GB News as well. Is that what it's called? Like up and coming, right? Yeah, that's also been one which I saw floating about.
But no, I agree. Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry, like his whole brand being that, like, kind of getting rid of these woke, like snowflake lefties, and then like more or less the same thing kind of happening. And the comments that he made following that interview, the fact that like he's just saying he doesn't believe any of that, it is so symptomatic if he's one of the first people that will be like, oh, like women should speak out, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as someone does, it's like, no, I don't believe you. I don't think that happened.
Yes. Actually, exactly.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
That is exactly what he's like. That's a great analysis.
Do you see his whole interview like from a few years ago? How he's like praising Meghan about her being so like smart and such a nice person. Yeah. I don't know why it's changed so much. I think maybe you think it has to do with like not being invited to the wedding, or I don't know. Like it just seems like it's a very personal thing. It's beyond just criticism. It seemed very like personal attacks and petty, But then he like say what you want about him. He knows how to get reactions. He knows how to get views. He's very good at it. He has a sense for that. Like, it's not about it's not really about accurate journalism for him. Yeah, it's just,
he has moments where like like for example, holding the government to account. I feel like with coronavirus, he's been all in all relatively decent at those kind of things. Like we've even played on the show the Matt Hancock interview, for example, where he grilled him. Yeah. But like he has so many bad takes, this being like one of many, and it's like what Rachel said there is like, he definitely, what you said there was actually just so true. Like,
the coronavirus thing, I think it speaks more in the UK media in general. The fact that he's the one that's been the hardest criticism. Like, I mean, it's fair play to him. He's doing well. He did well in holding, government to accounts. But the fact that he's like the strongest person who's like, who's been the most aggressive and critical of the government says something about the media apparatus in general, I think. But
I would agree.
But yeah, it's just like that was just one instance like out of many. Like he get like a broken clock's right twice a week, twice in the day. Yeah. So like that's the case with him, I think, in that sense. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has like a job lined up with GB News or something like I mean. Did he resign or did they fire him? He resigned, right?
I think he left, but I'm under the impression that ITV probably would have asked him to apologize or something like that, and then he was like, "I'm not going to do that," so he left essentially. Yeah. I mean, he's like I see him kind of like as the start of like the like how in America you have, I mean, it's mainstream now to speak about like cancel culture and stuff. he's like the equivalent of what that is going to be like in the UK. Like I see a lot of the culture war things in the UK just being a couple of months and years behind what we see in the US. And so he's really someone who's like built a brand off that. Like one of his book that he got released called Wake Up, for example, and just like his general branding is of these snowflake leftists which don't really exist in mass numbers, and it's just an excuse to be a dick to a bunch of minority groups and targeted groups in society. Like that's what that is, right?
I think it's interesting though. I mean, it's a bit of a side note, but especially in America, it's picked up a lot, even more now that Trump's left. Because I think they're trying to find an angle to get at the Democrats and the left wing in general. Because I think, I mean, we don't have to go into this a lot, but I think like the fact that now no Republican supported the COVID stimulus, looks very bad on them, and I think they're trying to find a way to deflect. Because it was, I mean, like that, the relief has benefited many people.
It's going to cut child poverty by like half, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And so there are material benefits. So I think it's almost seemed like this ramped up. Like I've seen like Tucker Carlson like talking, like some segments he's done are so stupid. But anyway, I think that's where the UK is heading soon, especially with the GB News, because
and also a lack of leadership, I'll say, with Labour with regards to socialist ideas and ideology more generally. But what is our? Do you have anything else to add, Rachel? Anything else to add on this topic?
No.
Okay. Are we going COVID situations now? I can take that, or I'll give a brief overview and then I guess. So we've seen a continuation of cases and deaths dropping in the UK, which is good. We've seen increases in vaccinations as well. It's well over 25% of the population given at least one dose at this point, which is great. Speaking of vaccines, however, the AstraZeneca one has been stopped in Northern Ireland, I believe, after claims of it causing blood clots, which is not great. But we'll just have to see how that develops. But besides that,
I will say Denmark, they did studies on the AstraZeneca vaccine, and they said they found no link between blood clots and the vaccine. So I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think as well, like a lot of leading kind of health experts have come out and said that even if it's like 1 in a million kind of would suffer from this, the impact of not having it and like suffering from COVID is a lot worse. Obviously, like you don't want a vaccine that has any kind of like really serious side effects, but
it's hard.
I feel like the UK government aren't taking it incredibly seriously, and I would kind of say that that's fair enough.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I'm doing this kind of stuff in chemistry right now, so I'm more sympathetic to. I understand how it's quite difficult to make a vaccine, be hyper specific in this case. But I don't think it's anything to worry about on a grand scale. Like as you said, Denmark has come out against that view.
Yeah.
There might just be a media pressure as well there.
Yeah, and I think like just in general about AstraZeneca, like the whole optics. I think we've talked about it a bit before. About how good this rollout has been for newly independent Britain. So I think, and also just like the disaster in Europe with like the distribution. And I think wasn't there recently about news about with Nigel Farage, like wasn't he like trying to like step back from politics because he saw like you saw how the vaccine rollout's indicative of the Brexit Britain, and how that will work. So I just think I think this is like the perfect thing, for like a newly independent Britain to have, like the success of the vaccine while Europe's basically
in the shambles.
Yeah,
no, it is unreal. Like, I mean, it gives a lot of propaganda points because I mean, we do know, we've looked at the studies here, for example, we know the economic cost of Brexit is we're getting hit a lot more than we're actually gaining. We've cited this LSE study which showed that the cost of Brexit is almost 2 times as much as the COVID cost will be. And so like we know like this obviously isn't going to be too great financially for people, but at the same time you have to give your hats off to the rollout. But again, as we've also said here, we don't think this will be indicative of a broader Brexit benefit in general.
Are you doing your haircut, by the way?
Sorry, what?
Are you doing your haircut, by the way?
My haircut? Oh, I love the Tories. I will have to do it at some point. I don't know. I don't know when to do it, to be honest.
Delaying
I have
it.
I have one more like dyed hairstyle left, and then I'll shave it off, and then I'll write that into my head. Yeah, I can't believe it. Like I actually was so sure they weren't gonna pull through. Like I would have never made this bet if I wasn't so sure. But yeah, I will. I'm a man of my word, so I will at some point do it. But yeah, I mean, do we have anything else to add to that? I think the COVID update's quite, minute at the moment. Oh, the nurses' pay, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Do you want to take that, Rachel?
No, you go.
Okay. So yeah, basically, with the whole budget being released that we did go over last episode, there was a big backlash over there not being an increase in pay for the NHS workers, and obviously, NHS workers deserve a raise. It's like they have worked so hard and like been overworked and overwhelmed, and there's so many things that are associated with even trauma by seeing so many people die of coronavirus and things like that. Like it's a whole, it's a big deal. And so yeah, there wasn't any proposed raise at the time, but this has been kind of come back like bit of a U-turn situation with regards to that. And so I think it was originally proposed as a 1% raise, and then more recently it's been discussed to have a 2% increase in pay and stuff. And even then, though, I did see YouGov polls which were basically saying that it was, I think, over 50, either just 50% or just over 50% of people still don't think a 2% increase in pay is enough, which, like, yeah, I fully get it. Like, I mean, it really isn't. These people have literally saved the country, and along with also other, key workers. But, in terms of saving people's lives, like directly,
they're on the like front lines.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, like I would also argue that lots of key workers and like public sector workers should be getting an increase in pay. But out of all those, I would say NHS workers.
Yeah, I think. Exactly. And I think going off that point, Benji, like the government have made so much about doctors and nurses and clap for carers and everything like that. And it really just is kind of like put your money where your mouth is. Like everyone's aware that it's, the like economy isn't in a really strong position right now. But like there's been a lot of borrowing for a lot of other different kind of initiatives and schemes and things, all quite rightly so. But yeah, I think it's just insulting, really. Such a low figure, and they're very right to strike.
Yeah. I mean, the most annoying part for me is the fact that the fence sitting on Labour's part again. They haven't come in like for clear support of a bigger raise for nurses' salaries, which I think is necessary. I mean. This is like a bread and butter issue for Labour, as we've said from time and time again, like that they have to come out in full support and unflinchingly so, like, no holding back. Like, once again, say what you want about Corbyn, but he not only would he agree with this pay raise, but he would advocate for even more of a bigger rise. So it's just these little things that are just frustrating. And we've seen this in the polls, like Labour slipping more and more behind, despite this past year of the Tories mishandling. I mean, obviously the COVID rollout, the vaccine rollout is helping, but we had so much months before then to catch up and attack and build a momentum. Yeah. And we've failed to do that. We've lost, like, Labour's lost support, and he hasn't even gained support in with younger voters as well.
Isn't Labour like over 10 points behind at this point? Like I think I saw 15 at one stage.
It's embarrassing.
Like that's so bad. It's not even an opposition party anymore. It's like just a party which you can stomp on and then like be finished with. Like it's so embarrassing.
It's only gonna get worse, as we come back to normality. I think
sure, it's unreal. Like
anyway, yeah, I just it's such a issue that's like so obvious for Labour's point of view. Like
I feel like Keir Starmer's gotten worse with this over time, but I don't know. Like I feel like he would have at the start of his leadership, he probably would have been more, more willing to commit to this line of questioning and pressing. But I just feel like over time, over the whole pandemic, he's just, I don't know, just maybe gotten worn out of trying to challenge the government or something like that, because it does seem like almost every single issue, which is like actually a bread and butter issue for Labour to win over public support, he just manages to mess up on, or manages to take the wrong position, at least in my view, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we know, like, you know, he's abandoned a lot of like the grassroots organization and support of the Labour Party, you know, in favor of a more managerial and like corporate support. So I don't know if that would have anything to do with his, you know, lack of aggressiveness when it comes to certain issues around public pay, like pay rises, you know, for public workers. Like, I don't know, like, what I still don't understand. I mean, it's just like a rehash of New Labour, like with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. But yeah, it's whatever. Yeah.
I guess we'll be moving on to South America, and with that as well, I believe, Rachel, you have to get going.
Yes, yeah, I will. But,
okay, perfection. Well, we'll see you in our next episode, Rachel.
Perfect. If I leave this, it's not going to like end the whole.
Nope, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you. Bye. Okay, so Samuel, me and you, shall we get on to our South American comrades?
Yes. Yeah. There's I mean, we're focused on one story today. I mean, maybe we can go into Bolivia a bit, but that can be more like informal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm talking about Lula da Silva, who was president for Brazil from 2003 to 2010. He was, you know, recently charged and arrested for, you know, I mean, there was a investigation called Lava Jato, which, you know, investigated corruption and fraud. It was initially for the state-owned oil company called Petrobras, but it just extended to the Workers' Party in general, that's Lula's part of. And they were just trying to, you know, they're trying to find cases of corruption, and I'm sure there was, but there was nothing really to stick onto Lula. You know, but eventually, you know, in 2018, he was convicted of, you know, very flimsy evidence, not much to support it, but basically charged of, you know, getting kickbacks, and I think it was worth 1.2 million euros or something like that. So yeah, and there's something to do with like an apartment as well. But, you know, most recent revelations, like especially from the Intercept and Glenn Greenwald, it showed basically that, you know, Sergio Moro, which is the Minister of Justice in Brazil, he was very politically motivated, and you know, the elections were coming up in 2018, so that was Bolsonaro was on the cards, you know, and it was supposed to be against Lula, and Lula was, you know, ahead, like he was leading Bolsonaro by quite a significant amount. Yeah. But, you know, you know, there's a lot of evidence from leaked documents that there was a political motivation to get those charges to stick to him and arrest him, you know, and they did do that. They prosecuted him, and he was released last year from prison, and, you know, a few days ago, was it 2 days ago?
Yeah,
the charges were dropped. And this has big implications for Brazil because he can run in the next election in 2022, and Poland shows, you know, consistently for the last few years, even when he was in jail, that he would head to head with Bolsonaro. He would beat him. So it is a big news for Brazil, and I just want to show, like, you know, just like how successful he was in these years of presidency. Like, you know, for example, like, okay, so he was part of the Pink Tide in South America, and the Pink Tide in South America was, you know, when, you know, left-wing leaders for various countries in South America were elected. You know, the first one was in Venezuela with Chavez, and then, you know, we have Bolivia with Evo Morales, Ecuador with Rafael Correa, Argentina with Kirchner, and Brazil with Lula da Silva. And, you know, in general, like that Pink Tide movement, you know, obviously, like, they weren't perfect, and some were more successful than others, but as a whole, these leaders were very successful in cutting poverty and extreme poverty, cutting unemployment, cutting inequality, and moving, you know, advancing the poorest of those countries, and just cutting that. His achievements were really incredible. You know, like, for example, when it comes to poverty reduction, he was responsible for lifting 20 million people out of poverty. I mean, we don't realize the scale of how many people that is. That's just a lot of people, you know. And it's like, there's not many developing countries who see such a big lift like that, so many millions of people. And yeah, like through like his program, his social welfare program with Bolsa Familia, like, that provided it was basically a direct direct cash transfer to people in need, and yeah, that just there's provided massive support for people, and yeah, as I said, lifted so many people out of poverty. It made many steps to significantly address hunger, and he dramatically cut that, if not outright eliminated it, like to a very large extent. And in doing that, he also promoted more modernized agriculture, local agriculture. So he still tied these things into local industry as well. So he was very effective, and his track record speaks for himself. So he was very effective.
Exactly.
I guess maybe that's why maybe there's so much motivation from the ruling class to get rid of him, to stop him from running.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's exonerated, and he's able to run in the next election. So it's a big thing. And yeah, I mean, obviously, like the thing is, like, even with him, like, it's not like he's like a far left like socialist. He was a left wing, but he was more center left. But he did utilize the state and his power, to make sure the poorest and the most vulnerable are taken care of in the society. So yeah, it is a big step for Brazil, and it's interesting because a lot of we've seen the resurgence of it, and the pink tide 2.0. As we covered, Bolivia had a landslide win. They won by so many points.
Yeah.
Alberto Fernandez in Argentina, he was elected in the last few years. Who else? In Ecuador, Andres Arauz, who was under the government of the pink tide leader, the left wing Rafael Correa. If there's no meddling in the elections and any foul play, he's clear favorites to win as well.
Yeah.
So there's these left wing leaders. There's a resurgence of it, and it just speaks to the success their predecessors had. In addressing these key issues of poverty. So yeah, just overall good news, and yeah, we'll see how that plays and how what that means for the continent itself.
Yeah, let's hope he gets re-elected. Maybe we'll see a little bit of a similar to Bolivia type situation.
Yeah. The thing is, also during the pink tide, because a lot of these governments, they were looking for regional and a regional support for development.
Yeah.
Instead of adhering just to unfettered globalization as a way to develop, and more being more subservient to the global powers, and instead of their developing on their own accord, they really found through various initiatives they supported regional development, and it did have results. I mean, for the most part. Obviously certain countries didn't play result into as much success, but overall as a general theme, there was quite big success. So I wonder if we've seen a shift to that again.
Hopefully.
It's interesting because I mean, it's clear all these key regional countries are seeing a more shift towards the left powers again. The one country which is not is Colombia, and they're very tight with America, and especially in regards to Venezuela, they're very active in in all their
business,
all that play there,
Yeah.
And also Chile, obviously, which is a history of close ties with America,
and also
so those are the two. But the thing with Chile, they didn't have a new constitution, and also I saw some polls. It's quite far until the next election, but guess who's the leading party in Chile? Communist Party.
No, I mean, to be fair though, in Chile, there's so
Chile
much.
goes down, how many nearly most of the region will be have left wing leaders, and it just speaks to a yearning for an alternative route.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Chile also has a lot of societal issues with regards to poverty and things like that, which, if you pay attention to the region's politics, at least in that regard, which leaders are going to be getting you a reduction in things like poverty and stuff like that, right? And so of course it makes sense. And there's I mean, as we've covered this a lot of the time, like there's a huge history of foreign intervention and imposing leaders on imposing undemocratically elected leaders and things like that onto these nations. So it doesn't surprise me that something like the Communist Party would be leading.
But even like Lula, the case of Lula, like you can play the ball, you can play the game, like you can do everything, you can just play electoral politics, like, and not force your hand on anything, look, but still they still use lawfare and flimsy evidence to kick you out. It wasn't a violent, aggressive coup, but there's political there's politics at play, and they bend. It's a bend of the law, and like to try basically get you out of government. So you can either like be forcefully kicked out, or you can more like through law, like through laws, like also with Rafael Correa in Ecuador, like they try to prosecute him for like Lula, very flimsy evidence. And he had to end up going to Europe to flee. He fled to Europe. And I wouldn't be surprised if his rulings get thrown out, because it's also flimsy evidence. So like, and do you blame countries? Like we can talk about countries that are like overtly aggressive and they play dirty as well. But what do you want them to do? Like
their sovereignty has been under like in South America, like the US and other European powers have not respected their sovereignty at all. Like that's just not how that's gone. I think I saw this thing recently where it's like most people in Latin America, like the biggest thing they care about is literally just their sovereignty being respected. Imagine if that was a poll in the US. Like it would be unheard of for that to be the case over there.
And like even like in Chile, like with Salvador Allende, he was the president in the 70s. If people who don't know he was elected, he was a democratic socialist. He got elected, and he implemented various things around land reform. Try to change the economy, and he end up getting executed. Like he didn't get executed. He's like they basically like stormed his the where he lives or where he works. I don't know, I forget. And he basically killed himself because he was gonna get locked up. He was gonna get tortured because once August Pinochet, who was the military leader then, he was far right. Once he got in power, he executed and tortured various left-wing figures. So obviously, it's very likely that he was gonna get killed. But that's what you get when you and he did everything by the book. So you can do everything right, but it's your politics. If your politics are wrong, you're gonna get taken out one way or another. You're gonna get isolated. So do you blame countries like Cuba and Venezuela sometimes for being very hostile? Like, I mean, it's like it's politics, like that. Like there's a reality to things, like, and one way or another, like even with ever, flimsy evidence of fraudulent elections. There's no basis, I mean, the OAS, the Organization of American States, they've historically been a tool for for coups. So like it's a tough situation, like, and ultimately these countries cannot be perfect because first of all they're in a country where they're at the whims of local and international oligarchy and corporate power, like who have a lot of say in how the country is run, and on a flip they can make the country suffer. So they have to play in that dynamic as well. But they also want to provide real results. So it's like obviously, like I'm sure in the Workers' Party in Brazil, for example, there's corruption. But what like every president in these countries have corruption in the ranks, that's politics, and it's just a double standard for left-wing and right-wing politicians.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, I mean it's because the right-wing politicians are often backed just by their foreign overlords in this case, which are often the US.
Like even like we can look at like Colombia, who has a right-wing leader. Like they've been on record killing, like we talked about this before, I think briefly, about like land, like people like indigenous folks who protecting land, like they've been like executed, in
Bolivia as well, like
but where the human rights the human rights organization for Colombia. Like they only focus on particular countries. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
and also like going back to Bolivia, like we've seen like a vast like amounts of arrests from the people who staged the coup last year.
yeah.
I mean in 2019. Um, and like I saw like a report from like an article done by Human Rights Watch, like that organization, and they say like how like it's a dangerous precedent to jail people who dissent, like, but they like
Yeah.
they have like Agnes, like her presidency has blood on their hands. They're responsible for so many deaths
They murdered
of,
indigenous people as well,
protesters.
and they murdered indigenous people as well. I believe Agnes did in her like administration, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, like as in, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna not lock up the people who staged the coup in your country? Like what? It makes no sense. Like what precedent? It's
You have
probably
to, like,
pretty decent precedent to set to be like, oh, if you try stage a coup in a country, yeah, you should probably get arrested because it makes like that makes sense as something to pursue.
you just have to look at the history of like South America, and the destabilization efforts, that has been
Yeah.
going on for decades. And even this minuscule thing of holding people to account actually in
Yeah.
Bolivia, like they're getting scrutinized. While
Exactly.
there's certain countries who get away with much worse than Bolivia.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I applaud them because they're gonna go through with what they're gonna do, and they're gonna Agnes is gonna be brought to justice, and people and like these Christian far right people in Bolivia who attacked indigenous people
Yeah.
and mass supporters, those leaders also be brought to justice, and rightfully so, because they have blood on their hands, and she's just crazy, that woman. Like
Yeah.
she's saying how indigenous beliefs are the practice of the devil,
Yeah. I know.
and she has brought the Bible to her when she was sworn in. She was bringing the Bible, just like a clear like provocation,
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it's good news about Lula, and we've seen a shift in it's back to like a pink tide moment, because I think people have seen like two different realities they can live in. You can be in a country that with a left wing leader like has a good record of cutting poverty, and also like in things like indigenous rights, like it's key. Like, and a lot of these left wing governments have been better. They're not perfect on that front as well. I mean, Bolivia, yes, but they've been pretty good, more or less.
Yeah.
But even like Lula was known for like protecting certain Amazon areas that the indigenous people live in. Bolsonaro has no regard for that. He just wants to sell land to corporations for producing palm oil and all that stuff, livestock, whatever. So yeah, I think people have seen it, and it seems like a backlash from like more right-wing, reactionary, austerity-based politics to more of a left-wing resurgence of that. So
that's good.
It's good, and I'm interested to see the implications of countries that have been ostracized from, because like countries like countries who like Venezuela or Cuba who have stuck with the left-wing leader, like they've been kind of like isolated for a bit. They had Bolivia, but a lot of the other governments who formed that regional solid partnership, they were gone to right wing, and they pulled out of their accords. Like I think it's called the ALBA, where they're like it's like regional development, and they just pulled out of it once the right wing leader got elected.
Yeah.
So I wonder, I'm interested in those dynamics and how that will change, and if it will be reverted back to the old way, and if have any success, and obviously the BS around meddling and destabilizing these governments. But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be these societies. There's always going to be a pushback, and a yearning for sovereignty and wanting to decide their own destiny. And they don't want to be in like this world systems theory where like you're at the whims of these countries that you have been for centuries, dating back to colonialism and slavery. Like I think these people they want to break that mold, and they want to.
Yeah.
We have to find a way to set up a system of of trying to like curve this uneven development, global development, and just more around cooperation and solidarity.
Have a more humanist politics, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's hard to do that with a capitalist system because we're dependent on these conditions, to keep our country going. So
Exactly.
it's interesting. Like, I mean, not we don't have to go on much longer, but I'm reading right now how Europe underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting. Like, especially in like the context of Western Europe, like how like you're talking about how in like when there's periods of depression, how that amounted to increased labor time and increased punishment on
Bro.
workers in Africa to
Yeah.
produce more for lower wages so that they can save face and continue to prop up their system to the detriment of Africa. So like
Yeah, it's
there's a
I
lot of
mean,
dependence on these countries.
there's similar things you see with like the British and India as well, like with regards to those kinds of things as well. I think it's like yeah, just a general phenomenon of colonialism generally.
Yeah, like where would we be without these countries? Like
Exactly.
yeah, and I think it's about time that there is like a claim like a cry out for like sovereignty, and it's good. I
Yeah.
mean,
Definitely.
obviously these movements are not going to be perfect because it's hard to escape something like this,
Yeah.
especially when you're a country that's very mineral rich. Like, and if you want to try an alternative route of development, you're gonna have a lot of barriers, trying to destabilize certain like your country. But I think in the long run, like it's gonna be suffering to change the dynamics of our economy. So yeah, it's interesting. It's gonna be. I think it's positive news about Lula and just in general the resurgence of the left in South America. It's good.
For sure.
Yeah. But
Anyway,
anything else to say?
no, not much to be honest. But yeah, with that, anyway, we wrap up episode 11. Thank you, Samuel, and obviously thank you, Rachel. But we already said goodbye to her. And yeah, see you guys all very, very soon. Bye.
Bye.